The thing that makes everything feel cohesive and melded together is the listening to everything else that's going on. So in some sense, you're not really thinking about your part. It's not in the front of your mind. You know it well enough to play it, but if your acoustic player is like playing ahead, right? Or they're like rushing a little bit, and your bass player is like behind a little bit, playing in the middle, pulling them both to the middle, or like speeding up a little bit to catch your acoustic player and then pull them back in. Or like the keys player starts playing some improvised thing in the moment, modifying your part a little bit to accentuate that, right?
Yeah, or give some room.
Or like, yeah, it really is though, that thing that makes everything feel together and cohesive is absolutely in the listening.
You're listening to the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is Matt Nall. Matt is a drummer, producer, and worship leader from Campbellsville, Kentucky, best known for his work on Promises of Wonder and All Things Rise. This episode is brought to you by Monk Drums. Monk Drums is a creative desert venture that strives to combine beauty and business as one heartbeat. Monk Drums' main focus is handcrafted wooden drums that allow us to love, assist, and serve all who accompany us on this path. Use the coupon code FERMENTPOD to get 5% off your Monk Drums order. Find them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Monk Drums. And every Monday, look for hashtag Monk Drum Monday. Speaking from personal experience, Monk Drums are wonderfully crafted and they sound amazing. They blend the best traits of both the djembe and the cajon, and I found them to be incredibly versatile in both the live and studio environment. Check them out at monkdrums.com.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at worshipteam.com. Worshipteam.com comes preloaded with over 12,000 songs, with new songs being added all the time. Hillsong, Bethel, Vineyard, Six Steps, Jesus Culture, just to name a few. Service building with Worship Team is a snap, and all the songs are completely legal and licensed. You can also find them on social media, Facebook at worshipteam.com, Twitter at worshipteam, Instagram at worshipteam_WT. Visit them at worshipteam.com for a free trial today. Complete worship planning with thousands of songs, easy interface, mobile apps, and legal rights for your church. All you need in one place, worshipteam.com.
All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? Adam here. You're listening to the Ferment podcast. I'm in my office again, and I have another actual friend with me. Matt Nall's here.
Hey.
That's right. Matt, you are a drummer, and I've been wanting to have this conversation for a while, mostly because you are a drummer.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a lot of things. You're a dad.
Yeah.
You're going to school.
Yeah, going to school.
Yeah. You make records. You produce records.
Yeah, started doing that.
Yeah. You play all kinds of instruments.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess one of the things that I do, maybe this is wrong, is I sort of like have labels for people.
Yeah.
Not in the negative sense, but it's like, well, what is a person?
Right.
You know, it's like, and there's this sense in which you take up drummer space in my brain.
Right. Yeah.
Among other things.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And that's the reason I wanted to talk to you, because if you've been listening to this podcast at all, you know that I've made a statement a couple times about, at least in worship ministry, you know, if you want it to be great, you kind of got to have a great drummer, a great worship leader, and a great sound person.
Yes.
And so I thought it'd be good to actually talk to a drummer.
Hey, I'm here for it.
That's right. That is right. Before we do the things we normally do, I just wanted to ask you one drum-related question that might be a little bit silly, but I don't know.
Okay.
We'll just start here. Is Rush the most annoying band in the world? I don't know.
Okay. Oh, man. Where to start with this question?
Start with your intuition.
Okay. Yes and no.
Okay. Tell me about the yes, and then we'll go to the no.
Okay. Man. So the yes, I feel like, now this is my opinion, I feel like the whole prog rock thing is, it's a showcase of talent.
Yes.
It's a chops showcase. Let's see how many time signatures we can squeeze into one song.
Yes.
Let's see how many notes we can fit into this fill or whatever. Let's see how many notes we can fit into the groove itself, right? But at the same time, that's so impressive to me. And it was really instrumental in my learning how to drum.
Really?
Actually. Yeah, big
Okay,
time.
I don't think I knew this.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's just do a timeout right there.
Okay.
Because I do want to go to origin story. We always want to start with that sort of thing. For people who don't know you, where did you grow up? And what sort of family did you grow up in? Was it a faith family? Were you guys, not Jesus people? Can you just kind of start there with us?
Yeah. So I grew up in Elizabethtown, which is like 45 minutes from Campbellsville, and it's nothing like the movie, if you've seen the movie.
Yeah.
The Orlando Bloom movie. And I did grow up in a faith family, and a very big faith family. So there were 5 siblings, mom and dad.
Okay, so you guys had a big family.
Big family, yeah. Big family in a tiny house, actually, to begin with. So, and dad was in Southern Gospel quartets, several.
Yeah. Can you just explain that for people? Because I think a lot of people who are listening may not know what that is.
Yes.
It's sort of a uniquely Southern expression.
Yes. So the most famous iteration of Southern Gospel now is the Gaither Vocal Band.
Yes.
So have you heard of that whole thing? Most people know Southern Gospel by that. But my dad sang in Southern Gospel quartets, usually 4 guys. Sometimes there are women, but
what part did he sing?
He sang lead, he sang baritone, he sang tenor.
Okay.
So those are the 4 parts, like tenor, lead, baritone, and then the bass.
Yes.
So yeah, they well, from when I was born to when I was 12, we didn't really have a home church, but we were in church all the time because they traveled around like Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee. They were around everywhere, constantly in churches, singing, doing singings. They call them singings.
Yeah. Was your mom a part of that, or was she just sort of along for the ride?
She, we were all kind of along for the ride, I guess.
Yeah. So this is like your dad's band.
Yeah. The biggest one that he was in several until he got in one called the Valley Creek Boys, and they were writing their own music. And when it came to like Southern Gospel charts, they actually charted. There's a song called "I Got a Hold of the Book." Yeah, and
I'm assuming the book is the Bible.
Yeah, I got a hold of the book, and the book got a hold of me. Is like the turn in there, right? So lots of like country. Country music often in the writing has those turns where
it's clever.
Yeah.
Cleverness is essential to country music.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but the thing is, they had a live band. They didn't sing to tracks and tapes and stuff. And that, like in those days, there were no CDs. So if a lot of people sang to actual like cassette tapes.
So you had to have a guy in the back who was pressing play.
Right. In multiple tapes. So you didn't have to sing just straight through your tape. Right.
Yeah.
But they had a full band, drums, piano, bass, guitar, acoustic guitar. I don't think there was an electric player. But
did your dad play one of those instruments?
No, Dad sang.
He was just a singer, and then the band people were separate.
Yes.
This is a big operation.
Band. Yeah, they bought and they toured so much, they bought a Greyhound bus, one of those dual level Greyhound buses, and they gutted the top, and so they put in furniture and TVs and stuff, and then they put bunk beds in the back. And my favorite memories growing up are just sitting in the bunk beds in the back, like drowning in diesel fumes.
Yes.
Going with them to singings and stuff.
Okay, so if you guys were going with your dad on these trips, were the other families coming too?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
There was a kid named Chad that we were friends with. I don't remember whose son he was. There were a couple of kids that we kind of hung out with a little bit, but mostly it was us.
There's always a Chad, isn't there?
Yeah. Chad was great. I think Chad was the tenor singer's son.
There you go.
I don't remember. But yeah, I remember though, to bring it back into the drumming, constantly being locked on the drummer. His name was Jerry Ratliff.
There you go.
And
how old were you?
Well, it's from birth to 12 years old.
Okay, so then when do you think you started noticing the drums?
As early as I can remember.
Yeah.
I was always patting on my lap. So I loved the drums, but I never really like considered having drums to play on. You know, it just wasn't even a thought in my head that would ever be, you know. So I learned to like watch what his hands were doing, I don't know, and just play it out on my lap.
Okay, so you're watching him and playing his parts on your lap.
Yeah.
Are you moving your right foot as the kick drum as well?
Yeah. Yes. But I'm both right and left-handed. So
what do you mean?
I'm ambidextrous. Like
you could do everything with right and left, or you do some things right, some things left.
I do some things right, some things left.
Same.
So
I do. I'm the same. I throw and like shoot with my left hand, but I bat right-handed.
I bat left-handed and throw with my right hand.
But I write, like if I have a pencil or something, I'll write with my right hand.
Yeah.
I'm totally screwed up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, same. But anyway, I would play the hi-hat part with my left hand, which if you're a righty, you're supposed to be doing it with your right hand, and you do the cross, right? So, yeah, and you naturally do that on your lap. Hi-hat's on the left, so I'm going to play it with my left, right? And as a kid, you're not like thinking about those things. So, yeah, that's just how I learned to like play the parts that I was seeing him play.
Yeah, so you accidentally learned how to play open.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I'm 12, and mom and dad, I remember it was Sundays, a lot of times we would stay home. And I remember waking up like, are we going to go to church today? Or are we not? And we would love it when we didn't. We just got to stay home.
Yeah.
Because we were in church 2 other times that week, you know. And I remember when they decided that we need to find a church home. That was a big deal. And they brought us into that discussion too. Like, hey kids, this is what we're going to do. We're going to find a church home, and found a church in E-Town. And Dad from Southern Gospel only. And when I say only, I mean only. Like we didn't listen to anything but Southern Gospel in the house. And it was never really like spoken, or maybe it was, but we do not listen to secular music, quote unquote.
Yes.
Or even like contemporary Christian music, like what's on the radio. So all Southern Gospel all the time. And that's all I heard until 12 years old. And then Dad gets this worship pastor position.
Oh, so he's not just looking for a church. He ends up working at a church.
Exactly.
Okay.
We go there for, I don't know, not long at all, maybe weeks or months. And there was this kind of blow up scandal with the worship pastor. And then this opening came up, and well, Dad's, Chris has been singing for so many years.
Yeah, he's a musician.
Yeah. And so he took over the team, and he started a youth band. And I wasn't quite in the youth group yet. But the drummer would never show up. And I remember just sitting there multiple weeks, the drummer not showing up, like, I need to say something. I can do this. I know I can play the drums. I've never been actually been behind a drum kit before.
You've just watched Jerry Ratliff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And played on my lap. But I just knew I could do it. So one Wednesday night, the drummer didn't show up. I said, Dad, let me do it. It was Shout to the Lord was the song. And I loved that song because the way that we played it anyway.
Key change.
At the sound of your name part, there was always this build that they would do. This 8th note, like, gah, gah, gah. And so I just knew I could do it. And I was like, Dad, just let me play at practice. And he's like, I don't think so. And this is in the moment. I'm like, Dad, I know I can do it. And he's like, okay. So I jumped back, and as I remember it, made it through the song well. Like no drum fills or anything, but I did get that little 8th note build on the snare and the floor tom thing. And he turned around, he's like, huh? Kind of a surprised look. Well, yeah, you can just stay back there.
Yeah.
And just kept drumming from there.
That's great. So from that moment, you just were the drummer.
I was fill-in when the youth band drummer wouldn't show up. I don't remember his name, but that doesn't matter, I guess.
Chad. It's Chad.
But yeah, and I would go to church hoping, please don't show up. Please don't show up, because I just wanted to play.
Yeah.
And so my first time playing was with other people. And every time I played was with other people.
Because you didn't have a drum kit.
Didn't have a drum kit. Yeah. So I learned to drum with other people.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't even have a kit at home to refine or learn or any of that sort of thing. And this is all pre-YouTube as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, but Dad, so only doing Southern gospel, Dad started researching and like, well, what songs can we do? And I remember thinking, oh, this is a big deal. We're not playing Southern gospel songs. We're doing like the stuff that I thought we weren't really supposed to be listening to, right?
Yeah.
Because it's too, I don't know, edgy or modern or whatever.
Yeah.
We did so many Vineyard tunes.
Yes, man.
So
do you remember any?
Oh yeah. We were a mix of all kinds of stuff that we definitely did. Holy and Anointed One.
Did you do any David Roos? Every Move I Make?
Yep.
Of course
absolutely.
you did.
We did
of course
that.
You did.
I remember I'd been drumming for a couple years when we found that song.
Yeah.
It came in those little CDs that those mix CDs, you know, our church ordered those, and gosh, that one was a lot of fun.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the new, like, oh my gosh, we're in it now. Like we're modern.
Yeah. We're new school.
Yeah.
One more question, maybe that doesn't have anything to do with drums, but I'm just thinking of your dad's 4-part harmony gospel band. Did that like form you guys in your house? Like, does everybody sing harmony?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We all could sing, and we could all hear the harmony, like just kind of without trying. It's in you. Like you, from a baby, you're hearing it all the time.
Well, what's interesting is some of our friends here at the Vineyard in Campbellsville, who are really great harmony singers, they grew up with the same experience you had. Yeah. Like even like Hannah and Sarah and the Jerums or Lavriska. You know, these are all people who had a very, very similar Southern Baptist / gospel formation experience. Yeah. And it's funny, in that world, harmony just kind of comes with it. Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there really is something to and I'm sure we'll get into this in a second, but you're being from a big family, constantly listening to Southern gospel where everyone has to pay attention to each other. There's a spot for everybody, right? So in this small house with 5 kids, everyone's got a spot and a slot.
I like
for
this.
a harmonious house, right?
Yes.
And then, and it just kind of, we weren't like, get in your place. You know, it wasn't like that. It was just, you kind of had to make it work with other people, and always listening to the harmonies, and that definitely informs how I play.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful metaphor. Mm-hmm. The idea of 4-part harmony, big family, everybody has a place. Yeah. Nobody's left out?
Yeah. Well, and everyone has an essential place, right? You take the bass away and it's weak, or, you take the tenor away and it's like,
Yeah. That is so interesting. Yeah. I love that. What a beautiful idea. Well, hey, can we just maybe shift gears for a minute? Yeah. Let's talk about drums and what makes a good drummer. If we could do that. I'd love to talk to you about that for a second. And maybe we'll go general at first and then dive in a bit more specific. So like great drummer, or even maybe more specifically, what makes a great worship drummer or a drummer in a church space? Yeah. What skills does a drummer need to be great? Not just useful, but really, really
Right.
amazing. And I'm not even using the word amazing here in the sense of all the lights are on you.
Yeah.
You know, not like the spotlight featured
No,
person,
no,
but
no.
I just know that in the moments I've played in bands, when the drummer is really great, they might not be playing something that's super flashy, but it feels like everything is held together.
Right.
Right. I can't always articulate what that is, but like what are the skills that a drummer needs, or what are the things that a great drummer has on board that gives us that feeling,
Right.
or pulls us together, or makes us great?
It is okay. So you can know the part and learn the part, and you should know and learn the part that you're playing. But it's not just the part; it's the thing that makes everything feel cohesive and melded together is the listening to everything else that's going on. So in some sense, you're not really thinking about your part. It's not in the front of your mind. Like, you know it well enough to play it. But if your acoustic player is like playing ahead, right? Or they're like rushing a little bit. And your bass player is like behind a little bit. Playing in the middle, like pulling them both to the middle, or like speeding up a little bit to catch your acoustic player and then pull them back in. Or like if the keys player starts playing some improvised thing in the moment, modifying your part a little bit to accentuate that, right?
Yeah, or give some room.
Or like, yeah, it really is though that thing that makes everything feel together and cohesive is absolutely in the listening to other people. That's what, I was in band and in drumline, like in high school.
Okay.
And your center snare is the captain, right? The leader, whatever you want to call him, the section leader. And they put him in the center, not on the end, right? And the reason they're putting him in the center is because everyone's listening to the center to play. All the drums have to sound like the same drum. If you have 10 snares playing these really quick parts, if anyone's off, it sounds all muddy and crazy. And so, that was instilled really early. You have to listen, and you have to listen hard and be precise.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's a great answer, and I can't help but thinking that some of that is a reflection of your growing up again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like listening to 4-part harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has a part, listening to the other places,
Absolutely.
finding your space in between those other notes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've noticed that in your playing over the years too, you're a person who clearly has the chops to play anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of the things I love about your playing is that you're someone who has a really wide range as a musician. I've seen you destroy country music, and I've seen you destroy, rock or a Killer's part.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But the thing that I love, especially that comes out on Sunday mornings, or maybe if we're making a record or something, is sometimes the best parts you play are not the most complex, but you've done this thing of listening, and you're making space, or you're coming alongside something that someone else is doing.
Yes.
And it's getting stronger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, oh man. Having the chops to be able to do something is one thing. But the chops aren't the point. So it really is like, learning to play with other people and listening to what's going on. Like Erin, one of our keys players, she'll often find these really pretty, beautiful things in these lingering moments. And it becomes like a rhythmic theme. So the song's over, right?
Yeah.
But instead of going back into the groove that it was, if it's wanting to like come back up, instead of going back into the groove that the song had going, listening to that rhythmic thing she's doing and creating like a new kind of feel around that. And then there's this fresh thing that starts to swell back up, or, whatever. Listening to the parts that are going on, though, is absolutely essential.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess in a great band, we're hoping that everybody's doing that, right?
Right.
We're hoping that everyone is listening.
Yeah.
not just playing their part.
Yeah.
I guess this is also why I've played with some drummers who had incredible chops,
Mhm.
and I kind of hated playing with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it might be why you hate Rush.
Oh, could be.
I didn't explain Rush or why I feel the way I did about Rush.
Okay, well, let's come back to it.
Sure. Okay.
Let's just jump in right now. It's not a big deal.
All right.
That's the beauty of the podcast.
So, okay, my Southern gospel drumming, very much straight pocket. Very few drum fills. It's just the groove.
Boom
very
chick.
simple. Yep, boom chick. Lots of cross sticking, lots of just simple. It's all about the vocals. And then contemporary Christian worship comes along, and it's a little different, but it's kind of the same. A lot of those same drum sounds in those early songs, lots of cross sticking, lots of like bell on the ride and stuff. And then and lots of reverb on the cross stick, like that. And it like sails off. So, but then, so finding this, one time my uncle comes over to watch us and babysit us, and he brings over this tape of Petra and this like Christian metal and stuff. I'm like, what is this? I felt like I was doing something illegal, like listening to this. And, burned it up though.
Yes.
And mom and dad, they were like, what is this? I'm like, it's Christian. It's from Uncle Jason. And they were like, oh God, Uncle Jason. Of course he would show this to you. But
he was the gray sheep of the family.
Yeah.
Not exactly black sheep.
So great. And so get into high school, I get into drumline and get all the chops in drumline. Just get your hands like flying, right? And our drum instructor loved Rush. We had an indoor line show that was based off of some Rush stuff. And so he hands me Rush. I'm like, what is this? He's like, take this home and listen to it and learn it all, right?
Yeah.
So I listened to like Tom Sawyer and Limelight and all the, and so at this point, my mom and dad had got me some drums. And I sat down. I would come home, I would close the door, I would sit in my room, and I had a CD player that had like a rewind 10-second button, and I would sit and listen to like the intro to Limelight, and it, boom, rewind, or Spirit of the Radio, sorry, that one's like crazy. So listen to it, go back, pause it, try to do it, crap, I messed up, go back, and just like learning all the parts to all these songs. But I had the chops from drumline.
Yes.
And I didn't know that this is like some of the hardest drum music you can play. I just didn't know that. Didn't have a grid that this is impossible.
Yeah.
So
sometimes not knowing is the best thing.
Absolutely.
Having no clue what you're doing.
And so learning all that stuff and then coming to school, and I'd play it like on the drum kit, the jazz drum kit in the band for like jazz band. And people were like, what? Oh, and I'm like, what do you mean? What? You guys can't do this? And they're like, no. And I was just so surprised. Like, oh, maybe I'm actually good at this, But then I was in some other bands and like a hardcore band in high school and stuff. But when I came here, and I played open for all that. But when I came here, I remember you met me.
Yeah.
We were playing a conference, I think. It was the first one that John Mark was playing at our university. Yeah. And we were practicing. And my friends have been begging me to come to the Vineyard. Yes. And I'm like, no. Because the Vineyard had this reputation in our town for being crazy.
That's right.
So no way am I coming. And you walked up. And the first thing you ever said to me was, you got beats, man. I'm like, oh, thanks. Thanks. And you're like, you should come play with us sometime. And I was just so, okay.
Yeah, you just said okay.
Just melted. And gave in. And started playing here and realized this is something different. Like the chops, which I loved, and I loved all the quick stuff. This feels familiar. It's not what I've been playing for the past however many years, 10 years or something. Or at that time, maybe, I don't know, 5, 8 years. This isn't Rush.
Yes.
And
More space is required.
yeah. And I realized like, oh my gosh, this is actually my roots. Like this is Southern gospel. The drums are, it's about the pocket and the feel of the whole song and not just a cool drum part.
Yeah.
So, and I thought, well, this is way easier actually than all the Rush stuff. So I'm going to learn to play cross. And from when I first started coming here, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to force myself to learn to play cross. And it feels kind of uncomfortable, but the music's simple enough, right?
Yeah.
So, and it would also force me to play simpler and not just do the go-to stuff that I would always do. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, and also when you first came here, we were playing and writing some songs that were definitely more, I would just say, Americana, Southern.
Yeah.
Really country music. Because I'm thinking even the first record we made with Vineyard Worship, which was Promises of Wonder.
Yep.
It's essentially a country music record.
Totally.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's historically has always been a big part of our sound. Even today,
Yes.
that stuff still just keeps coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm thinking of Sam Yoder's new tune, Jesus Beautiful,
Yes.
which is, I mean, it's, I'm using air quotes here. It's modern worship,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really country music in its roots.
Yeah. Well, so much of worship drumming, if you were to replace the parts, if you were to find a song with the same tempo and swap the drums, well, the vibe's there at least.
Yeah.
It's so similar.
Yeah.
It's very much about the vocals and yeah.
Yeah. That's a great observation. Matt, I've heard you talk about this before. Could you, for everybody who's listening, could you talk about playing drums in a smaller church?
Yes.
And I don't just mean smaller in terms of less people.
Yeah.
I just mean smaller rooms.
Yes.
Most churches in America are under 200. I actually think most are under 100. Most vineyard churches are under 200.
Yeah.
We see churches on YouTube that are, or worship gatherings on YouTube that are like stadiums or
Right.
10,000 people or,
Right.
these big rooms.
Yep.
Which that's really awesome, but that's not our normal Sunday morning experience.
Yeah.
And a lot of the worship music that's written today is, I feel like it's stadium worship in
Yes.
some ways. And so then I think a lot of our musicians, particularly drummers, there's a worship style in drumming right now that is very particular, and I could pick it out. Like you could isolate the drums in a track and I could tell you if it was a worship record or not,
Yep.
And I think it's more like stadium oriented, but I've heard you say some really cool stuff about playing in smaller rooms or with
Yeah.
smaller people, smaller numbers of people. I'd love for you to just riff on that for a minute.
Totally. Yeah, I have played in some very small rooms, but with the same, on a tour, right? So the same tour, you're playing in a really big room. That same night, even you could be playing in a really tiny room.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of myths floating around about how to get your drums to sound good in a small room.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
Things like,
oh man, time to rustle some jimmies.
yeah. You're talking about drum shields?
I'm talking about, drum shields. Talking about playing with hot rods to control your volume.
Yeah.
Talking about, the entire fish bowl, right? Where everything's like
With a
up.
roof. You have a roof
With
on
a
it.
roof. Yeah. Sorry, fish bowl sounds pejorative. I know that they're useful in some. First, I want to talk about the hot rods thing. Hot rods are absolutely useful. But they are not primarily a volume control stick.
Okay,
That's
so
not what they're for.
What are hot rods for?
The song, the Oasis song everybody knows, Wonderwall,
Yes.
right? That song was tracked with hot rods. Like, if hot rods were a volume control tool, I hardly think that they were having volume problems in the studio and saying, okay, well then what? Just use the hot rods, right?
Yeah.
The hot rods are a tone choice. It's purely for the kind of sound that they make coming out of your drum.
Yeah.
They are quieter, just
Yes.
like brushes are quieter, but they're not for volume control.
Yeah.
Your hands are for volume control.
So what do you mean for that? Like, are you saying just hit the drums quieter? Hit the drums
Exactly.
less?
Yeah. So, all right. It might be hard to describe, but I'm going to try.
Yeah.
So we'll start with Bruce Lee.
Yes.
So Bruce Lee has his like famous whatever, it's 3-inch punch or 1-inch punch, right? Where he'll touch you in the chest and then just bring his finger in and leave his fist where it was and punch from there and just knock the person down, right?
Yes.
It's because there's no magic to that. He's punching through the person, right? He's not aiming to hit the front of their chest. He's aiming to hit their spine,
Yes.
right? So he's aiming through the body. It's the exact same thing with hitting a drum. You're not aiming to hit the drum head itself. Like, that's not where you're aiming to stop and pull your stick back. You're aiming an inch below the head. So you're playing through the head. And the thing that changes the dynamic, the volume coming out of your drum, is the stick height. Purely the stick height.
From the drum head.
From the drum head.
Yes.
So a lot of drummers will know a lot of, this is great terminology. It's really useful terminology if you don't already have it, rather than play quieter, right? Because, well, what does that mean? Like, how quiet? If a worship leader, a sound guy's like, hey, drummer, play quieter. Thinking of your stick height in terms of inches from the head. So there's 1, which is like 1 inch. That's like a ghost note stuff, right? 3 inches, which is really quiet, but that's an actual hit on the head. It's not just a little ghost note. 6 inches. So 1, 3, 6, 9, and 12. And 6 inches is where 6 and 9 inches is where you really spend a majority of your time.
Yes. What is David Grohl?
Dave Grohl is beyond 12, right?
Like it's like 3, 6, 9, 12 Nirvana.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
Nirvana. That's when you're using your arms, right?
Yes.
So, but 12 is like maxed out. Even in a stadium, 12 can sound bad because you're overplaying your drum. It's like if you strum a guitar too hard, it loses all the resonance, right? It's just like hitting a drum too hard. It can lose all of its body. So anyway, instead of saying like play quieter, it'd be like, hey, I want you to play at a 3.
Yes.
And then if your drummer knows that scale, they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Every hit I do, I'm keeping it 3 inches above the head.
Yeah, or above the hi-hat.
Or above the hi-hat,
Yeah,
or
with your
above the
timekeeper.
tom. And it's going to be different for everything you hit, right? Whether it's your hats or your ride. So some of that's just knowing your instrument. Like you can play a tom a lot louder than you can play a snare before it gets abrasive, right?
Yes.
So yeah, and playing in small rooms, I have never had to opt for hot rods to control the volume, and it doesn't lose its intensity. Like, you're playing the drum at the same intensity. You're still aiming an inch below. The drum still sounds good. Like playing an inch below the head, it pulls the warmth out of the drum, even if you're playing quietly.
Yeah.
So the drums still sound good, and because it's in a small room, even though you're not blasting it, it still sounds loud because it's in a small room, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So what I hear you saying is play to the room.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And playing to the room is it can be thought of in terms of inches in measurement.
Yes.
3, 6, 9, 12.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a smaller room, maybe you're going to play in that 3 and 6 world.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we're not looking to lose intensity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is what happens when you play with hot rods.
Yeah.
So part of that hot rod sound is kind of a hollowing out of the sound, and it's just counterproductive a lot of times. There are songs I use hot rods on.
Yeah,
I
was going to say, if you think Matt is beating up on hot rods,
no,
you're not, because you use them all the time.
I use them all the time.
Yeah.
But I use them when I want the drum to sound that way.
Yeah.
I'll often mix up. I'll play a hot rod in one hand and like a stick in another, or hot rod in one hand and a brush in another. Or it just depends. Like,
yeah, can we talk about that just for a second?
Mm-hmm.
Because you do something I've rarely seen any other. I don't think I've ever seen another drummer do this. There's probably other drummers who do this.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I'm not seeing it.
Okay.
So a lot of times, maybe we'll be doing a song here, and I hardly ever lead worship now, so I'm on the front row. I'm in the pastor position, and so I'm up close and I'm seeing what's going on. And so maybe it's a quieter ballad, and you're playing with brushes.
Yeah.
And I've seen you do this so many times. You will tuck a hot rod and a stick underneath your armpits.
Yeah.
And you will play brushes on a snare.
Yeah.
And you're doing that brush thing. Maybe that, maybe even that circle brush thing. What's that called?
Sweeps. You're just like, yeah.
Yeah. You're doing that, and then perhaps the song has come up a level in both intensity and volume, and all of a sudden the brushes are gone and you've got a real drumstick on the ride.
Yeah.
And a hot rod on the snare or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you just
totally.
Yeah, can you just talk, how did you where did that come from?
I don't know. A lot of it. Okay. So since we're talking about dynamics.
Yeah.
Dynamics being volume. A song, this is what I learned from Rush, by the way.
Yes. You can throw Rush in my face this entire
it's
episode.
right.
It's great. It's great.
So if you listen to the drum fills specifically in Rush, they're very simple in the beginning of the song. And then by the time they get to the end, it's way more complicated and crazy, right? So things progress in difficulty and intensity and dynamically as the song goes on, right? So, and I learned to leave yourself somewhere to go.
Yes.
So if you're playing at full volume on your first chorus, but if you're going to start looping the chorus at the end, it's like you're tired. It's like, well, we've maxed out. We already maxed out. We maxed out in the first chorus. So there's nowhere to go, right? So one thing that's great about starting a song with brushes is that you've got lots of room to go somewhere.
And it's funny how those dynamic changes, they accentuate the emotion of the song.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
And the feeling in the room.
Yes. So it is amazing. So when you're playing with brushes and you start a song with sweeps, that kind of, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, just like YouTube some jazz drummer.
Yeah.
And you'll watch it. They're sweeping these brushes around a coated snare, making this that kind of sound.
Yes.
So if you start a song doing that, it's amazing what going to a stick, a real stick, a wood stick, brushes are real sticks, quote unquote, and at the end of the song, just hitting quarters on the ride, gently quarters on the ride while you're doing like your snare thing. And it just adds this lift, something so simple as just some quarters on a ride.
But we still didn't overwhelm the band with volume or anything, but we did give a lift.
Yes, it's not like, okay, now I'm going to slam with my brushes. I just wanted to cut a little bit more. A brush on a ride doesn't cut.
Yes.
So, and a hot rod on a ride doesn't cut unless you're kind of slamming it on the edge or if it's mic'd well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love that technique though. And I love that idea of leaving some room for the song. And maybe never even getting to the top of our dynamic range, leaving yourself a little bit of that headroom.
Yeah. Well, and it requires knowing the song.
Yeah.
Like, so at the beginning of the song, I'm like, okay, I know where I'm going to end up. So before I start playing the song, I'm going to prep for where I'm ending up. And that's where the tuck in my sticks under the armpit came from.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, at the end of this one or in the middle of this chorus, I'm going to swap to a stick. So I'm going to, if it's going to go in my right hand, I tuck it under my left armpit. And
Yes.
if it's going in my left hand, I tuck it under my right armpit.
Yeah. Well, I think what I love about this particular technique is not only just the ingenuity of doing this and thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to go there, so I'm going to need those sticks at the end of the song. But I love that you're able to make these transitions seamlessly. Like they just happen so perfectly.
You don't have to reach across to a table that you've got other sticks laying out on. You don't have to leave yourself space. You can literally hit the 4 on the snare from the last measure, just drop the brush
Yes.
and then grab your stick before you get to the 2 of the next one.
That's right.
And it can happen super fast as drawing a pistol. Think about it. They're holstered.
Yeah, that's right. They're holstered. That's so good. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about playing in small churches. We've talked about like dynamic range stuff. Here's another thing that happens a lot of times. What can a drummer do to help out a band when maybe you're sitting in with a new collection of musicians? You know, I'm just thinking of those moments where, you know, we're playing at church and a lot of churches have bands that change a lot, or maybe you added 3 new people to the band and you're the new drummer as well. And no one really knows each other, or there's enough new people that you know that feeling.
Yeah.
And now
absolutely.
we're going to play music together. Or just to throw this back in our Vineyard context for a moment, we're playing at a regional conference or a national conference.
Yes.
And you, the drummer, sit down and you look out on the stage with the people you're playing with that evening, and you kind of don't know any of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. What can you do to help that moment?
Well, it goes back to the listening thing, and not just listening to, this is going to sound so cheesy.
Yeah, we love cheese.
You're not just listening to what they're playing and going off of that. You listen to their personality. Like when you're talking to them in practice, are they a loud, boisterous person? Are they confident? Are they not confident? Are they nervous about doing a conference, or is this their like first time leading at their church? You paying attention to all of those things and knowing going in like, okay, they might get stuck. They might not know what to do. So they might lose some lyrics or lose some words or whatever. You're always listening. And so as a drummer, you and Josh talked about it last time. Your drummer is leading just as much as your leader.
Yeah.
And your drummer.
In fact, that was the next question. So we can just keep going there. That's great.
Well, your drummer has the power. Your drummer really does have the wheel in a lot, in a very real sense. If your drummer, when you throw the neck of the guitar up and say, let's end the song, and your drummer decides not to and do the big fill to start it again, you're in for another loop. You're in. There you go. So.
But what I hear you saying is you're not just looking for maybe the conversation around arrangement, but you're even trying to take the temperature of, is this a new leader?
Yes. So
in general, is their personality forward or maybe reserved? Because that's going to inform the way they communicate with you and maybe even the way that they lead.
Totally.
Yeah.
And there are some people that are quiet personality, but when they get on stage and they start leading it, they're like, who is this person, right?
Yeah,
like
that's
Jimi
right.
Hendrix is a famous example of that.
Yeah.
But all that to say, you just have to listen. And when your leader is not confident about, oh my gosh, I can't remember, are we going to go to the chorus here? And I've done it long enough, I can tell when someone's not sure where they're going to go. I'll add an extra 2 counts to a drum fill on the front end to let them know for sure we're definitely going to the chorus.
Yeah, this is one of the things. Yeah, this is great drumming right here, people. The drummer can actually lead you into the chorus.
And they should.
Yeah, you can give me some cues in your feel that let me know.
Yes.
So even if you're in, like you, the drummer, I mean here, you're intuiting that maybe it's a new leader.
Yes.
Or maybe it's a nervous leader.
Yes.
And you just have this feeling that, oh my goodness, maybe they've lost the arrangement here.
Yes.
I can keep them on track.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
And do it with a drummer. One of the biggest jobs a drummer has is transitioning. So transitioning down into a verse, transitioning up into a chorus, transitioning into a bridge, transitions. It's prepping the room. It's prepping the band. It's prepping the leader. And some leaders need a little more prep. Like if they've just lost the plot, it's like, okay, I'm going to do a full measure drum fill, or I'm going to raise the hats earlier. Just something to indicate we are getting louder and there's no confusion about what's going to happen right now.
That's right.
Whereas if it's a leader that's done it forever and you've played with them a ton, you can play in more surprising ways. Like you can mess with those transition moments to make them seem and feel more surprising. But your leader knows, well, yeah, the drummer knows we're going there. And even though he's not leading up to it, I trust him to like make a little surprising moment out of this or something.
That's right.
You can be more surprising. But in those newer, more nervous leaders, it's leading them and it's supporting them. It's not leading them, it's supporting them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I love this idea because all of us are going to be in those moments where we play with new people. And that can either be a really great magical moment where all the unique things that each person bring can come to bear.
Yes.
And make something great. Or it can be a real not fun experience because we're learning each other. But I just love what you're saying, particularly with drummers, if we listen and then if we can intuit not just the song and the arrangement and coming prepared, all that stuff that should just be happening. But if we actually start really keying in on our leader, we can actually help them instantly.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the moment.
Yeah.
Every room I go to, every new room I go to, I always, after practice, because we always have a little rehearsal, after the rehearsal, I go find the sound guy and say, hey, it feels like I'm playing to the room up here. To me, it feels like it's not too loud, but what can I give you more of? Like, what am I not peaking? Where do I have room? And what do I need to pull back on? So when we did our stage treatment here, I was playing to the room before the stage treatment with the cymbals and stuff, and keeping the cymbals back. And Bobby came up to me a couple of weeks after, Bobby Spangler came up to me after a couple of weeks after the treatment. He said, hey, you have a lot higher ceiling with the cymbals now that we have this treatment. So I'm like, oh, great to know. If he had not told me that, I would have been playing quieter, like chiller cymbals where there was a lot more room to go. So talking to your sound guy that's the only way you're going to know that.
Yeah, that's great too. And sound people in general want to be included in those conversations.
They should be.
Yeah.
They absolutely should be. No, and drummers and sound guys are, often portrayed as enemies.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it should be the opposite. If you just trust one another.
Yes.
And the sound guy a lot of times is telling the drum, you just need to play quieter. But if you as the drummer approach the sound guy and say, hey, what needs to be quieter? The sound guy or the sound person is more likely to tell you where you can give it more gas.
That's right.
Because he trusts you because you care.
Yes.
Obviously, you're the one asking the question.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because you're bringing up another sort of really nuanced idea here, but it is a part of all great drummers I've ever heard. Not only are great drummers playing to the room, and not only are great drummers playing to the people that they're playing for, like the conversation we just had, but great drummers are playing to the kit.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is it's something you've been talking about this whole conversation of learning how to, in the moment, play each piece of the drum kit perhaps at different volumes to
Yes.
create an overall sound that works for your leader,
Yes.
the congregation, and then the room,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
And if we get the volumes on our drum kit right, if we can get the cymbals under control, but maybe we do have more gas on the toms and the kick,
Yes.
and finding the right volume in our snare, that's just a great sound.
Yes, it is. You are mixing your drum kit and how you're playing it.
Yes.
So that
You're the first mixer.
yes, absolutely.
Before the mixing board, before the compressor.
Yep. As a drummer, you should be mixing your drums and not thinking, oh, the sound guy will bring the toms back or boost the toms, or the sound guy will bring the overheads down. You should be playing the drum in the way you want it to be mixed.
Yeah.
And it's why I like the whole Glenn Johns mic setup in the studio, right? You've got one mic over the floor tom. You've got a mic in front of the kit. You've got a mic overhead, right?
Yeah.
3 mics on a drum on the drum kit, or 3 or 4, and you're playing. But in order for that to work, you have to play the kit mixed. You have to know what it's going to sound like.
Yeah.
As a cohesive unit, right? And play it in that way.
Yeah. Well, that's good stuff. Let's talk about this for a second. Click or no click?
It depends.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about that. Talk about that, because
I love the click. I love playing with the click. We play with the click here in Campbellsville every Sunday.
yes.
And I love that. I also love not playing with the click. So, but in practice, absolutely 100% play with the click. When you're practicing, if you don't have a metronome on, you're not practicing.
Yes.
You're just not. You're goofing off.
Yeah.
I really feel strongly about that.
Yeah.
So, reason being, like, the click tells you, it's very revealing about who you are.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking of it like it sees your soul, but it kind of does.
Yes.
Like, the click will tell you your proclivities. So if you, oh man, I rush drum fills, or there are some guys, half of the drummers rush drum fills, and half drummers slow them down. My proclivity is to slow down for the most part, but a click will tell you that.
And I, as a piece of the worship band, if I'm leading and I'm playing guitar, which is what I normally do on the rare occasion that I'm in there, my tendency is to rush the click.
Yeah.
I get amped.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And what's funny is if I'm in the studio, I play to the click just fine. But there's something about the worship stage or with people, I get jacked.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
And I'm rushing that click, you know?
Yeah.
And I always rush the click in rehearsal.
Oh, yeah,
And I have to settle into it. Yeah.
Well, this is a fun thing, and it happens all the time. So if you're a drummer running a click, you've run it for any period of time, you're probably already doing this. But I set the click not to accent on the 1, to where it accents all the quarters, and I put the 8th note pulse in there. So if the tempo is like, I'm just going to snap. If that's the tempo, the click is dun, 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 right? But there's no accent on the 1. And reason for that is if like band drops out and the leader keeps going and they get way off the click, I'll turn it off. And when they hit their 1, whatever the 1 is, I'll turn it back on to keep them from just like taking off, right?
Yes.
So you know they're not listening, but maybe they're feeling a little bit of the click in the back, right?
Yes.
So you turn it back on the 1 just to keep it sort of reined in, because the band's going to come back in, right? And if you let the tempo get too out of hand when the band comes back in, it's a huge jar. It's like just slamming on the brakes.
Yeah.
So I'll play the click for a couple of beats. They'll get off of it again. I'll turn it off. I'll play the click for a couple of beats. They'll get off. I'll turn it off. and then turn it back on right before the band comes in. Because when the drums and the rest of the band's in,
You can pull it.
Well, the person's going to fall back in, right? Yeah. So treating the click like an instrument, not being afraid to turn it off. If you get off, turn it off until there's a moment to turn it back on. If you don't turn it off, it's just a chaos in everyone's head.
Yes.
And no one knows what to listen to. So if you get off, just turn off the click and then find a moment to reset it.
So what you're saying is, especially during rehearsal, use the click.
Yep.
And then, maybe during live worship, use it if it suits you, or maybe it doesn't. Depends on the style sometimes as well.
Yeah, I meant practice, by the way, using the click. I didn't mean like with the full band if you're practicing without it. I meant as a drummer or as a musician practicing on your own, right? If you're but if you really want to use a click, but for some reason you can't in your band rehearsal, that's another thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are so many great records too that were recorded without any click.
Of course. No, a really great band, it's moving a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, some of my favorite Rolling Stones tracks are not recorded with a click.
Totally.
They're just it's like freewheeling.
Yeah.
Which feels awesome.
Yes.
But
absolutely.
I think my opinion on this is that at least with most church bands are comprised of people who are not professional musicians, and this is not a knock or a slam. This is just people who are showing up to serve, and so sometimes the click can be really helpful for raising the floor.
Yes.
Doesn't always raise the ceiling for the band.
Yes.
But it raises the floor and gives us a good foundation for training and just settling some of our musical anxiety.
Totally.
At the beginning, it gives us musical anxiety.
Right.
But if we stay with it, it will relieve musical anxiety.
Absolutely. It's a comfort.
It's a weird paradox.
It's the whole, if you've ever tried to meditate or do the whole mindfulness thing, right? Where you're just paying attention to your breath. At first, it's terrifying. Like it's oh my gosh, my mind is like, I didn't know. I can't quiet my mind, right? And it's like anxiety provoking at first. It's like, what? I thought this was supposed to help. But after a while, you get used to you just kind of settle into it, and you give in to the click. You just trust it.
Yeah.
I've heard so many times, oh, the click's broken. Speeding up. It's a computer, dude. It's
Yeah. No, that's good. So that's kind of my opinion is it can help some of us who are not professionals level up.
Yes.
And at first it's going to give us anxiety, but if we stick with it, it'll take anxiety away.
Absolutely. It'll make you a better player.
It makes you a better player. And then if we're a really great musicians, in terms of like a really great group of musicians, and maybe we went out on tour for 3 months and played every night.
Yeah.
We can turn it off, man.
Yeah.
We've got flow or something at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It really is like it's the same as the perfect pitch thing. Like if you do it enough, if you sing enough, and someone's like, "Hey, sing a C," and you can sing a C, you just know. Like, or if you play guitar enough, you play your E string, and you know round about where the E should be, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with the metronome. After you play with it for so long, you can turn it off, and you still feel it in your head.
Yeah.
And
it's a weird thing that can train you. Yeah, it's great. We were talking about just a second ago that the click at first can give us anxiety, but then it'll take it away.
Yes.
And I've also noticed as a worship leader, and then just as someone who plays in the band, or someone who's a part of that worship moment, and then especially through all the traveling that I've done through the years, and just all the new worship leaders and band people that have come up here through the years.
Yeah.
I've noticed that some people, it's almost like they multiply their anxiety into the room.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people can take anxiety out of a room.
Yes.
And by people, I mean, that's worship leaders and band people.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
I'm just thinking of the moments where, it's Sunday morning. There's a few hundred people in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and half the people really did come to worship Jesus.
Right.
And they know what this is.
Right.
And then the other half, they've never been here before.
Yeah.
Or somebody brought them and they didn't want to come.
Yeah.
And they're not sure. And so the room is like this strange mixture of comfort, familiarity, friendship, and then anxiety.
Yes.
And then sometimes you get a worship leader or a drummer or a musician,
Mm-hmm.
and, it just feels like all of their internal struggles are coming through the mic or through the instrument into the room. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah. Can you riff on this with me for a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah. What has been your experience there?
Okay.
Or what are some ways that we can, as musicians and drummers and leaders, deal with our internal stuff so that we're not just multiplying anxiety into the worship moment?
Yeah. Okay. A lot of, at least in my experience from behind the drums, I've done that so much and so often that being behind a drum kit really feels like a home to me. It feels normal. It feels like sitting on the couch and watching Netflix. It's like, it just feels normal. So I think a lot of the anxiety thing is reps and just doing it enough and being comfortable in the situation. I still get anxiety when playing with a new person, not necessarily on our stage, but doing like a national conference or something, or you're going to drum for somebody and you've never played with them before. And you're like, oh my gosh, is this going to be the time where I'm revealed to be a fraud? Like, this is going to be the thing that exposes me as a terrible drummer or something. I still feel that today. Once I get in it and realize, oh, this is a normal person, just like everybody else. That's just for me behind the drums. We've talked a little bit about helping the leader deal with anxiety by supporting them, guiding them through the song. Just get a little outside of the music by itself and dealing with your own stuff. I led a pretty charmed life, like never really had much hardship at all. I was really loved.
Yes.
Coming home, it's like, oh, my mom and dad love me. There's like this grounding there, right? I went through a really tough time just in my life mentally. Never been an anxious person. Started dealing with severe anxiety, like debilitating, thinking I'm having heart attacks, like not able to get out of the bed. It was bad. I had to do some serious like internal work to figure out, well, what's causing this and what. But coming out of the other side of that, there's something about dealing with something really hard and going through pain that just turns you into a different person, turns you into a more solid person. Like there's a sense in which I know who I am now, or I know what I'm capable of. I don't know if that's really making sense.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
So when you're in a moment of high stress, I've seen worse.
That's right.
I've been through worse. And I know that I'm supposed to be here. Like, I know I'm good enough to be doing this.
Yes.
For me, there is just a personality trait. There's always been this fear that like somebody's going to come along and say like, that's not good enough. There's something, that whole imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Conversations can definitely be had off the stage and should be.
I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah. Like, hey man, what makes you so nervous about,
Yes.
Like, oh, I'm not nervous about that. It's actually this other thing that I'm dealing with and, whatever.
Yeah. But that's part of being the community as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, and I love that you shared that story, because that is so true. Because there's a certain amount of self-awareness that I think all of us need to have. that we're always bringing our lives to whatever we're doing.
Yes.
We're always bringing our lives to worship. The whole thing.
Yeah.
The parts we're aware of and the parts we're unaware of.
Yeah.
So I love that idea. So just by being more self-aware, I actually have the chance to be a person who doesn't multiply anxiety into rooms, but I can absorb.
Yeah.
But then there's also this other, and I think it's a very related idea, which is if I can become aware of the fact that as a leader or as a musician or part of the worship community, that I'm bringing my life to this stage and to this moment, or that I could have the goal of being the kind of person who takes anxiety or who takes fear out of the room.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about having a God complex here.
Totally.
Clearly,
No,
Jesus is the master of anxiety, and clearly Jesus is the master of fear. But I'm just saying, if who I am can be someone who's absorbing some of this, from the room, I think that's also helpful.
Well, it's pastoring the room in a sense, or like serving the room. Like, so it doesn't always happen, but so sometimes I'll lead, like here.
Yes, and you're a great worship leader.
Thanks.
Yes.
And just like it's weird, but I have no problem at all. I actually love it when it happens, playing a note and just no words, no talking, a minute and a half of just letting it sit there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've seen in a lot of several times a shifty room just settle. If you just give it some space, because you're not afraid of the space, right?
Yes.
And I mean, the leader is visible, obviously, they're up on the stage. And if you're anxious about the space, the room will be anxious about the space. And they'll know it's like, oh, this is some like contrived kind of thing. But if you just settle into the space and be like, look, we'll sit here for half an hour until we feel like we need to move.
That's right.
Then that's, I don't know. They just, how the language you're using of absorbing the anxiety, it is kind of like that, or dissolving it. You know?
I think so too, and I love that image too, and because I've seen you do that. I've seen you just hold the one, and just let the band settle. Hold the one. We're not even really singing anything. We're just we're letting this moment gather us together.
Yeah.
And it's really great.
Focuses things without saying, hey, everybody, let's get on the same page here and let's all
quit
pray.
Being nervous.
Yeah. Let's all pray together. Like, let's focus the room. It's just like, just start playing and sit there and see. I don't know. See, it's fun.
I know for me, and this goes both in the worship side and then also in the preaching pastory side. The thing that gives me the most anxiety in terms of like on stage leadership, number one is not being prepared.
Totally.
So when I know that I didn't do the work in the week, I'm bringing in my anxiety with me. And I think that goes for drummers or for musicians.
Absolutely.
If I didn't listen to the songs, if I don't know them, if I'm an electric guitar player and I don't know the turnaround.
Yes.
And I know that I don't know it.
Right.
Yeah, it's like that makes me nervous. Or if I'm a leader and I'm going to play a new song and maybe I didn't lead it in my room enough, play it, and I don't know the lyrics, then I'm bringing that anxiety. Or when I'm preaching, like if I really didn't do the work, I just get nervous.
And you're not thinking about what you're doing in the moment. You're thinking about the part that's coming up that you don't know how to play. And so you're like, and so what you do play is full of anxiety.
Yes, exactly. And then the other thing that makes me anxious or makes me nervous is when I'm with a new group of people, or like in a band setting, or if I'm in a new church and I don't know their house rules, I'm bringing a little bit of the anxiety with me, right? Because there's always like unspoken rules.
Totally.
And I don't, I'm rather bold in my nature. I'm rather bold, but the truth is, underneath the boldness is I don't want to make trouble. Like I literally listen. I don't want to make more trouble than we need to make. Like I want to get along with people. I want this to be fun and great and Holy Spirit infused for all of us, right? So I've noticed for me to be someone who's not adding to anxiety, but someone who's helping dissolve or absorb anxiety, if I will prepare, and then if I'm going into new people or new places, if I ask lots of questions to the pastor or to the worship leader, or if I'm sitting in with a new band, maybe it's at a regional conference or at a national conference, I'm going to play with some new people. I try to just ask, I try to get to know the people and ask questions and get an idea of what the broader expectation is or how we do things. And that makes me feel more confident. And once I feel settled, then I'm not putting all that back into the moment.
Yeah. Well, you've mapped your area then. You're like, you know where the boundaries are and you know like where, the expectations thing. Well, that's what makes me so nervous too about playing with new people. What are they going to expect of me?
Yes.
There are, by the way, okay, so if I can just talk to the nines.
We're going to have an Enneagram conference.
Look, I'm not even into the Enneagram. So the people that are terrified by displeasing somebody, right? There is a such thing as unrealistic expectations. So where you show up prepared and you're ready, but they're asking you to do something that is one that you can't do. So let's say they ask you to do something you just cannot do. Tell them, I cannot do that. I just don't know how. Or, hey, look, sorry, I've never played that or I've never heard that. Like there's this, it feels like, especially if you're conferencing a lot or playing at conferences a lot, or if you're traveling a lot, there's this expectation that you know everything. You know everything they would ask you to do. And that's just unrealistic. Like you never will. So saying, hey, I don't really know how to do that. Can you give me an example? Like ask questions like, can you give me a reference song or another song that you'd like it to sound like that I maybe know? Or, but there is a such thing as unrealistic expectations, and just being honest about it. Be like, look, I don't know how to do that. Or saying, hey, I think that's a little unrealistic for you to expect of me. Even if they're the leader, that takes a 9. None of you 9s will ever do that. I know. So it's fine. But it's okay to say, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I've said that a lot.
Yeah.
Like I just don't know how to do that.
Yeah, it's powerful.
And then they know, like, oh, you're being honest with me. And then you just form a different kind of relationship with the leader, because then you're both trying to figure out what do you know? Like, what are your influences, or what, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Well, and if we bring this specifically to the musician and worship world, you know, if we have electric guitar players or drummers in our bands, and we've already sort of established that chances are they're not going to be pros. Mm-hmm. They're going to be volunteers, good people. And a lot of them are great players, right?
Yes.
But if we have an expectation that on Sunday morning, our electric guitar player should be John Mayer.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Or that our drummer should be Matt Chamberlain.
Right.
Well, that's sort of unfair.
Absolutely.
Right? Like it's like homeboy's an insurance salesman.
Yes.
And coaches soccer on the side or whatever.
Absolutely.
You know? So there is this sense in which asking questions to find out what are the expectations, but then on the other side of that, as leaders, being able to intuit who's in our band and what is realistic, right? So we want to ask people to grow. We want to have atmospheres that give people opportunities to grow, that actually help them grow.
Yes.
But isn't placing demands on them that they can never meet and will only ever perpetually dishearten them.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
I totally agree. And like, so that's thinking like a leader. I mean, trying to get your band to sound like something that it, one, cannot sound like in your room.
Yeah.
Like, so if you've got those like Bose towers, or you're meeting in a house or something, you just cannot pull off the Bethel sound.
Yeah,
right?
that's not going to happen.
Like, not going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's not just fine. That's good.
Yeah.
Like, and the Bethel sound is great.
Yeah.
Like,
completely.
yeah. But knowing, okay, what is possible and go from there. Like, just get out of your head what's not possible. Just don't even go there in your brain. And I think like that with production work, like, what can this player give me?
Yes.
Okay, those are our options.
Yeah. And what do they bring to this table?
Yes.
What are they great at?
Yes, and it focuses the sound and it focuses the song, and everyone knows what the boundaries are. And everyone knows I'm not going to be asked to do something that I can't do. And my leader's not trying to embarrass me. And but at leaders, like with your drummers, knowing what they're able to do. Having a conversation with them. Hey, what bands do you listen to? And listen to those bands.
Yeah.
Like, even if you hate them, or like, listen to it for a little bit.
Yeah. Begin to meet your players in that spot.
Yeah. And then say, hey, you listen to this. Why don't you listen to this? Tell me what you think.
That's right.
I remember I asked you, we were in Peru, and it was like a year. I think it was the first year I started coming here. I went to Peru with you guys. And I remember asking you, like, I am seriously musically deficient, like with bands that I know. Can you just make me, like, can you put on my iPod? I had a little green iPod shuffle.
Oh, yeah. I remember those, the little Triscuits.
Yeah. And I gave that to you. I said, can you just put music that I absolutely should know on here? Because I just don't know. And you put a mix of all kinds of stuff. I remember hearing Arcade. You had talked about Pete Yorn, right? I'm going to embarrass myself. You had talked about, I'm going to put some Pete Yorn on here, and that's the only name I remembered. And I was listening to Arcade Fire, and on the shuffle, there was no screen. You couldn't see band names, and so I heard this song. I'm like, oh, this must be. And it was an Arcade Fire song. And I'm like, hey, is that song like Funeral? Is that Pete Yorn? Yeah. Like, confusing Arcade Fire for Pete Yorn is like how little I knew.
Isn't
about,
that interesting?
Like, music that was going on.
Yeah, but those are great ways to get a common language.
Yeah. And now, gosh, I incorporate all that stuff in it. Like, we want this to sound like Pete Yorn. Okay, got it.
I know what that is.
I've got a reference song. We want this to sound like Sigur Rós. Oh, got it. Yep. Like, I know what you're after. I'm going to switch to my brushes and like play
brushes and mallets.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to sing whale sounds.
Yes.
In the background.
But getting a common language and a common reference base.
Yeah.
Saying it helps a ton.
Oh, man. Matt, this is good, man.
Yeah.
Really good. I think this is going to help some people.
I hope so.
Yeah, dude. I think it will. Hey, why don't we do this just to close out? What are a couple things that drummers could listen to that would help their playing?
Bands?
Anything.
Bands?
Yeah, bands, artists. Is there something that could just help that in general translates, in your opinion?
Yes. Just a few things that flashed in my mind when you said that.
Yeah.
The John Mayer Trio album, Try.
Yeah.
Steve Jordan drums on that. The first time I heard that record, coming off of listening to mostly like Metallica and Rush and stuff, I'm like, oh, those parts are boring. I could do that. But I just kept listening to it, and you realize, like, wait a minute, the pocket in this is insane. And even though the parts aren't like full of chops, they are perfect parts for what's going on, right? So not a ton of drum fills, but when there are, they're perfect. And
they're dirty.
They're dirty,
man.
And some of the simple ones, like the that thing is like, that's in there a couple times. It's simple stuff, but it's just placed in the right spot, and it's pocket all the way. So listening to records like that, because the pocket is where the groove is where you're going to spend 95% of your time. Yeah. So spending 95% of your practice time on drum fills makes no sense. Like you should should be spending 95% of your practice time grooving to stuff. Yes. Like not just to the metronome, but to the track that you're playing to in your head. Like actually learn songs, like to reproduce them.
Yeah, well, and what I like about that reference that you're giving is because it is just a trio, there's sonic room in there and you can actually tell what's happening.
Yes. Yes, you can. And in there, I just never think about this because I kind of forget about it. But like some people, when they listen to music, hear the whole song, and some people, it's easier to pick out the parts. It takes some practice. Yeah, learning to reproduce songs and like listening to just the drums.
Yeah.
Learning the drum part and then playing it with the track. And I mean, maybe whatever. Maybe most people can do that. I think most people probably can.
Yeah.
Especially most musicians.
Yeah, but I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other record? So the John Mayer Trio, maybe one more record that people could dig into? It doesn't even have to be the coolest thing in the world, but it's just something that is a good example.
Okay. Music for the Morning After. Pete Yorn's Music for the Morning After.
Yeah.
The drums on that are like freaking freight train. Yeah. Like all the way. It's just pocket. Like there's an eighth note. There's something playing on every eighth note. Like do do ka ka do do ka do do ka ka do ka. Like just all the way through, and it's great.
Yes,
it's great. I'm not saying do that on Sunday.
Yes,
but.
But it can that record and those drum sounds. There's a texture to them. There's a feeling to them, and it's a really great example of. Oftentimes, the drum beats in there are cool, but they're not complicated.
Yeah,
even a fairly inexperienced drummer can play a lot of those things.
Yeah,
and I think they're fairly creative.
Yeah,
so I do like that reference as well.
If you listen to a lot of worship music, like especially modern worship music. Listen to something that's not that. Because you were right earlier, the drums do have a very specific slot that they sit in.
Right now.
Yeah, right now.
It's really narrow.
Yeah. And so back to the like Promise is a Wonder record. Several people are like, "What? Why did you use brushes on that?"
Yeah.
Like, that was kind of weird that, you know, and some people, it was refreshing that there are brushes, and it didn't occur to me not to use, you know, like listen to things that that don't all sound the same.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Great. Totally great. Matt, let's wrap up with this. We do this at every single one of our podcasts.
Oh, geez.
Can you just share with us a moment when you experienced great joy?
After my first son was born, my first child, which is a son. I have 2 kids. I went out to the car and I sat in my car and I cried for half an hour in the car. Like I don't know why. I do. I was going to get McDonald's. Tasha wanted a sausage biscuit. That's what it was. I went and got in the car, and something about disconnecting from all of that, you know, the hospital thing. And I said, I have a son. And I just wept for half an hour in the car.
Yeah, man.
And seeing there's nothing like having a kid.
There's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because that answer comes up over and over again on this podcast. Yeah. But it comes up because it really is the truth.
It is.
Nothing in your life up to that moment prepares you for that.
It doesn't. And I was afraid, like, am I going to know what to do? And then they're born and you're just like, it all melts. Like you just, whatever, whether it's primal or what. But when you see your baby, it's just like your world is different.
Oh, great story. Great story. Hey, Matt, so if people have been listening to this and they maybe want to talk to you more about drumming, or maybe they want to take Skype lessons or something, I know you do that.
Yes.
How can people get a hold of you?
Facebook Messenger is the best way.
Okay.
So, and you'll have to find me on the Messenger app. So my Facebook profile's hidden.
That's right.
Yeah, just go on the Messenger app. You can find me on there. Matt Nall.
That's right. Well, listen, if you are needing some help in these areas, or if you just want to talk to Matt more, you should totally reach out. If you're a drummer and you'd like to take a lesson or two, you should do that, because Matt's always here at the church giving people Skype lessons.
Yeah, man.
So you should totally do that. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Peace.
Hi, everyone. This is Melissa Keller, Events Director for Vineyard Worship. If you've been enjoying the podcast, I've got a couple of ways you could really help us. First of all, review the podcast on iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media, Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. Thanks for listening. See you next time.